Welcome to Annual Day. I know this is a pretty unconventional way to celebrate, but here we are, and I hope you enjoy the next hour and a half. Next slide. I know we've all been living through very difficult times, and it seems even more appropriate now than ever to reflect on where we are in Canada and begin with our acknowledgement. It's also National Indigenous Heritage Month in Canada. So we would like to gratefully acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it's been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We are very grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Next slide. Next slide. It's also Pride Month. And although, no, back again for a sec. It's also Pride Month. And although we can't celebrate the way this group did last year, I know that there are many activities that are being planned for the next year, and I'm very proud of the activity of this group, and have fun next year. Next slide. So today we're going to spend a little bit of time just reflecting on where we've come over the past year, and I'm going to lay out our strategic priorities for the next 4 years. I'm then going to hand over to the vice chairs to announce the awards and give you an update from their portfolios, and then I'll be back for a very brief closing. This has been a truly unprecedented year. I don't think I've used the word unprecedented so much in my entire life as I have in the last few months. If you look at the synonyms for unprecedented, it's absolutely been new, novel, groundbreaking, revolutionary, epoch-making. For most of us who weren't around through the Second World War and weren't around for the Spanish flu, we will probably never see a public health crisis like this again. And this unprecedented COVID crisis and the events that have happened are very much coloring our celebration today. And I am going to start with that, but I will come back to the celebration. Next slide. I'm very proud that on December 30th, this all became very clear when Blue Dot, which was founded by our own Cameron Kahn in the Division of Infectious Diseases, announced to its clients that there was a cluster of unusual pneumonia happening around a market in Wuhan, China. That was the first world recognition of the novel coronavirus that has come to be known as COVID-19, and this was 9 days before the World Health Organization announced the infection to the world. Next slide. COVID has absolutely taken its toll on all of you. It's very clear that it has taken a different toll on different members of our community. I know many of you have really been suffering on the sidelines because you're at risk of infection and have felt uncomfortable in the acute care hospitals. Others of you have been living with small children and not so small children at home and have struggled to keep going with virtual care and your clinical inpatient responsibilities with schools closed and daycares closed. You've been working on the front line masterfully, those in the ICU, in the emergency department, and on the wards, particularly in general internal medicine, have really done a magnificent job. And I guess we're all feeling exhausted and don't really have any certainty about what's going to come next. But I do think it's important for us to recognize that this has been an unprecedented time that you have borne extraordinarily well. Next slide. The people that have been behind the scenes have often not been the people that are most visible to us, and that is our IPAC, or Infection Prevention and Control crew. And I really just wanted to personally thank IPAC leaders who are named on this slide because they have had an extraordinarily difficult time keeping all of us safe from COVID infection. So while I want to thank all of you, I specifically want to call out our IPAC leaders who are often not visible to us and behind the scenes working extremely hard. Next slide. Next slide, please. It's been unprecedented in the sense, back please, in the sense that I don't think any of us planned for what happened in long-term care. We spent a heck of a lot of time planning for the acute surge that would fill our ICUs and our inpatient beds. And at the same time, while we knew that the virus was going to disproportionately affect the elder population, we didn't think about long-term care. We collectively neglected to really protect the elderly in long-term care. And for that, I think we're all incredibly embarrassed and sorry. Next slide. It's not just been coronavirus, but also more recently in the last few months, the rise in anti-racism, violence, and really groups around the world who are absolutely horrified by what has happened to George Floyd, and which parallels very much what's happened in our country with respect to our Indigenous populations. I think we Canadians like to feel that we're somehow immune from the racism that has lived south of the border, but we're not. And I think it's really taken a toll on many members of our community, our residents, our fellows, our faculty, and we have not been untouched by this, and we are we are going to pay attention. Next slide. So it was pretty interesting that last week I received a bunch of interesting emails. The first was from Brian Coburn, also a member of our Department of Medicine and ID, who'd had a frank conversation with his lab members about how they could take anti-racist action as scientists. The trainees identified to him that awards were inequitable and fundamentally racist barriers to success, opportunity, and advancement that they felt were entrenching discrimination at every stage of training and promotion in academic medicine. He wrote to me that he thought that they were making an exceptionally clear and well-made point, and he promised them that he would follow up with leaders, as he did. About the same time, I got an email from, next slide please, from Mara Waters and Maxime Billick, PGY2 residents in internal medicine, on behalf of over 50 residents in the University of Toronto system. They wrote to express their profound concern, next slide, concern for the meager response from Toronto healthcare institutions regarding persistent systemic anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism within the healthcare system and our emergency services. They felt that this inequity that we were seeing was absolutely being manifest in the COVID pandemic, as we've all also seen, where the impact of COVID on underrepresented minorities has been much greater. Their hope was to organize and advocate for vital change within Toronto, and specifically decreased funding of the Toronto Police Services and reinvestment in emergency mental health and social services. Next slide. This letter was sent to Lisa Richardson, myself, Arno Kumagai, and Kaveh Shojanya. We've had quite a bit of time to think about what our response should be. We feel pretty strongly that we should respond. But we feel compelled to ensure that we have the input of our faculty, of our trainees, of our community, that we cannot speak on your behalf. We can have personal opinions, but what Maxime and Mara were asking for is a more global response from us. Although we're not likely going to have time for Q&A today, there is a question and answer element on this presentation, and you'll be able to see it. I am going to ask you to please tell us what you think. What do you feel our response should be, both to address the issue that Mara and Maxime have raised, as well as Brian's students' comments. Next slide. I thought perhaps to frame what I think our response should be, it makes sense to go back to September of last year when we began planning for the 2020-2024 strategic plan. We came out in excellent shape from our 5-year review, and we were really trying to take stock of where we got to, where we still needed to act, and what strategies were required to maximize our impact. We had a keynote from Kevin Smith, CEO at UHN, who really did challenge us to do more with less and to get political. Next step. I'm going to review some things that we discussed at the retreat which I think relate very much to what I've just said about our current situation with respect to anti-Black and anti-Indigenous racism, and more collectively about disparities in our healthcare system. We all were pretty happy, proud that we seem to have sparked discussion and action regarding equity, diversity, and inclusion in our community. We now having much more discussion about professional behavior and holding people accountable. And we're beginning to see a real caring for one another. If we looked at our department leadership over the first 5 years, we were happy that we were seeing better representation of both women and underrepresented minorities. But we acknowledge that very much more is needed to be done. Next slide. We had a keynote from Shelley Dev, who I think most of you know is an incredibly articulate and emotive speaker, talk to us about physician wellness. And I think she summed it up very beautifully, and there was consensus that we do want as a department to move towards the creation of a workplace culture where we actually look after one another. And I think the COVID era has really shown us that, in fact, we're almost there. You definitely have displayed caring and kindness towards one another in this difficult time. Next slide. We were happy with how we've been doing with respect to mentorship across the lifespan and early career development. And in fact, the last CFAR, Continuing Faculty Appointment Review, which was led for the first time by Schiffer Ginsburg and Mike McDonald, resulted in 100% getting through successfully at 3 years. That is the first time ever. So congratulations. Next slide. But we also know that we're not doing enough to support late career faculty who are making the difficult transition to retirement. And specifically, if you look at that tail, we now are seeing the boomers heading through late career, and it is tough. And COVID yet again has put an extra stress on that transition, and we need to pay much more attention to that later life transition. Next slide, please. We're pretty proud of our scholarship. We are truly world class. It doesn't matter which ranking system you look at. We are in the top 5 with respect to research and clinical medicine in the world. And I think we should be truly, truly proud of that. But we all know that it's becoming increasingly challenging to balance clinical and academic responsibilities. And again, COVID has put a huge financial toll on us with huge reduction in clinical income, which is very important to sustaining our academic mission. We are incredibly important to Canadians' physician scientist pipeline, and we need to ensure that it continues. We need to ensure that for all of Canada, not just Toronto. And we specifically need to increase our attention to ensuring the basic science pipeline stays alive, but that costs money. Through the innovation of a number of young faculty, we've now got an incredible infrastructure to use big data to improve care through AI and machine learning, such as through Gemini, iCore and critical care and others. But now we need to really leverage these tools to advance care and outcomes. Next slide. We know that we've got competency-based design implementation very much in front of us. We are going forward with internal medicine or Royal College accreditation in November, and that seems to sort of take all of our attention from us. But we can't lose sight of the fact that we really want to make sure that our training programs are providing residents and fellows with the skills and knowledge they need to provide the highest quality care to patients in the future. And I think, again, COVID made it violently clear to us that we need to be able to teach in the constraints of a COVID pandemic environment, which puts stresses on simulation, for example, and also around virtual care. Next slide. And obviously, this is Jeanette's favorite analogy. We've got less sauce and a bigger pizza. How can we decide where we really need to take a lead versus follow or partner? And how can we become more active in the political discourse? And I think, again, this relates to the racism discussion we had a minute ago. Next slide. So we've decided that as leaders, partners, and mentors, we're going to leverage our academic excellence, collaborative spirit, intellectual curiosity, and insatiable drive to accomplish 4 priorities in the next 4 years. Next slide. The first is, and not in any particular order, to create a clinical and academic environment that promotes mutual respect, compassion, integrity, and inclusion, and thus fosters the well-being of our faculty and learners. To innovate models of learning and care to promote sustainable, person-centered healthcare system that meets current and future population needs. To promote, sustain, and amplify our international status as scholars in basic and clinical research, education, quality improvement, and healthcare provision, ensuring that the discoveries and new knowledge that we generate gets to the patients and providers who need them. And finally, we are going to get political, to engage in transformational change as leaders, partners, and effective followers alongside decision makers. Next slide. We've taken the first step towards creating our new portfolio, Vice Chair Culture and Inclusion. Lisa has 3 themes of work: EDI, wellness, and mentorship, and she's going to speak to this a little later. And I don't know, Moira, you got it in the picture because I love this picture, but Lisa obviously is on the left. So back to Brian, no, go ahead. Back to Brian, Maxime, and Mara. I am very confident that we will take action. We need to use the best evidence to make the best suggestions and think of it from our perspective as healthcare providers and academics. Next slide. But this is a day for celebration, and so I don't want to leave you with a more solemn note. Next slide. We do want to celebrate our promotion recipients, chaired this time for the first time by Martin Schreiber. We again 100% through at the decanal committee. Congratulations. Next slide. Here are our associate professors. They are an incredible group of individuals. I want to point out that the left-hand full column is Emerge Medicine, and this is, together with the full professors that you're going to see, is the largest cohort of Emerge Medicine promotions, and I am so delighted to see that. I also want to tell you that 8 of these associate professors were promoted on the basis of sustained excellence in teaching, which I hope reflects the fact that we are putting the value of teaching up there exactly aligned with creative professional activity and research. Next slide. Here are our full professors. It's a smaller crew this year, but they're going to make up for it next year. And again, I'm so incredibly proud of these individuals. Congratulations to each one of them. Next slide. We have 3 professors emeriti: Michael Gordon from Geriatrics Medicine, Herbert Ho-Ping Kong from GIM, and Gary Levy in Gastroenterology and Hepatology. Unfortunately, they won't get to enjoy the new Emeritus Lounge in our Naylor building because of COVID. But once the dust clears or the pandemic clears, I'm looking forward to having a celebration of all of our emeritus professors in the lounge and in our new space. Next slide. We specifically want to honor Michael Gordon today. Michael is an iconic geriatrician, educator, author, and storyteller who personifies the meaning of humanism in healthcare. These were words that Paula Rochon wrote in an article she published in February of this year in the Journal of the American Geriatric Society about Michael. We have decided on behalf of his contributions to rename the Humanism in Medicine Award as the Michael Gordon Award for Humanism in Medicine. Next slide. I've also, myself, taken the liberty as chair to give a special award to Marie Faunin for Humanism in Medicine. Those of you who participated in last year's annual day know that it was a pretty emotional one, where Margaret Herridge, who is the wife of Rob Stewart, shown here on the right, received the Researcher of the Year award. It was emotional because it was very soon after the transplant of liver transplant given by Marie Faunin to Rob Stewart, both physicians at St. Michael's Hospital. Probably the most generous and selfless act a human can give. They're both well. I haven't seen Rob. He's a urologist, I believe, at St. Mike's, but I understand that they're both well. And this article just came out in the CMAJ, and I encourage you to read their experiences. Next slide. We've had a lot of transitions this year. Next slide. Most importantly, we've moved out of Toronto General Hospital, which is a big deal for the Department of Medicine as it's lived there its entire life until now. We're now residing at the Naylor building, a beautiful heritage building. Our new boardroom is on the right. the Emeritus Lounge, which actually has side offices for people that are, you know, downtown and want some place to park. We've also seen the transition of our administrative lead for the department. Claire Mitchell moved on to Chief Operating Officer at McMaster, which is huge leap for her, and got to stay in Hamilton where she lives. And we got the incredible Margaret Ma, who everybody at Sick Kids, where she was previously, said, wow, you got Margaret Ma? And Margaret's already made an incredible impact in our department. Next slide. Although they're not done yet, we have Millennial reps on our department executive. They finish at the end of the summer, but Kaif Pardam and Amanda Steinman have done an amazing job representing the young faculty over the past 2 years. We have to change the name now because I think millennials are passing, but we will be putting out a call for applicants for this position, and we really encourage you, if you're in your first few years on faculty, to think about being at the table and helping us make sure that we don't lose sight of what's important to you. Next slide. Andreas Lopakis, who had worked with us for 2 years on figuring out how we better engage patients in departmental activities, was appointed the editor of the CMAJ. Over this period that he was lead for patient involvement, he also brought healthy debate into the Department of Medicine, and we're so proud to have it. And Seema Maraha was recruited to St. Mike's and has become the editor of Healthy Debate. And I think she's doing a magnificent job, as I think anybody who's been reading about the faces of COVID and many other important things have been noticing. Next slide. So thank you to those who have left us, and I'm very, very appreciative. Next slide. We've also seen a lot of, oh, congratulations. I don't usually have residents and fellows present. This is obviously last year because we didn't have the opportunity to have our usual celebration of our graduates. And I know that your divisions are doing that for you, but I really miss the general Department of Medicine congratulations that we have at end of year. And I just really wanted to thank the residents and fellows who are graduating this year for all of your work, your effort, and we've really had a pleasure having you here. Next slide. We've welcomed 84 new faculty members over the past year. Next slide. And a number of new leaders. Laura Targovnik came from Winnipeg as the departmental division director, and you'll notice the change in name. It's no longer just gastroenterology, but gastroenterology and hepatology. Next slide. Susanna Mack, a homegrown, has taken over the division of cardiology. Like Laura, Susanna's already deep entrenched and making absolutely amazing improvements, changes that were, I think, needed for these divisions. Next slide. Barb Liu also has moved from program director to now division director of geriatrics, taking over from Sharon Strauss. Barb is also the regional geriatrics lead for the Toronto region and is also doing an amazing job. Next slide. I mentioned Sharon a minute ago. Sharon has officially been appointed, although she was in the interim role as Tom Parker moved on to Chief Medical Officer. But Sharon is now officially the Physician-in-Chief at Unity Health, St. Michael's, and she's, as always, a pleasure to work with. And finally, Michelle Ledenovich has come up officially last September as the Physician-in-Chief at Sunnybrook and is also doing a hell of a good job. And I am really enjoying having both Sharon and Michelle on our senior executive, as well as our new DDDs. And now I am going to hand over to Arna Kumagai. It's my pleasure. I'll come back and talk to you at the end. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Jillian. And greetings, everybody. This is a little unusual. But I'm delighted that so many people have been able to attend. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start out before talking about kind of what has happened in education over the last year to really talk also about transitions. The first major transition is that Schiffer Ginsburg is stepping down as Director of Medical Education and Scholarship. I have to say that University of Toronto is clearly on the world's map as the preeminent center for medical education internationally. And so it's arguably the top. And a lot of this is due to the work of the Department of Medicine, members of the Department of Medicine, and a lot of that is due to the leadership of Shifra. And Shifra has done an amazing job. She's stepping down. Ryan Bridges, who has been essentially kind of the wingman, is going to be filling in and taking over the position. Eliot Cooper and Lisa Richardson pioneered a person-centered care curriculum from basically the first year of medical school through the end of residency. They have really made a huge impact in terms of the overall curriculum, and their term ended as of March 30th. Big changes in terms of administration. Janine Hubbard, who has been essentially the institutional memory for the department in terms of all things post-grad, has got moved on, and in her place, in a position that has been really revamped and expanded, is a new person, Sarah Jung, who comes to us from the School of Dentistry, and she's been here, literally jumped in with both feet, has done a wonderful job, and we're really looking forward to working with her. Next slide, please. Other transitions, I just wanted to mention two site director transitions in core internal medicine. Natalie Wong, who's being replaced by Eric Seng, and Lympha Stroud at Sunnybrook, who's being replaced by Zach Fletchenfeld. So Natalie and Lympha have played a huge role in terms of recent mobilization of COVID, as have the other site directors under the overall directorship of Jeanette Gauguin. And this has been part of the major thrust of the department in terms of responding to the COVID pandemic and crisis. And I just want to acknowledge that as they're stepping down, how deeply, deeply grateful we are as a department to their efforts. Dov Gandel has taken over for Barb Liu as the program director for geriatrics this year. Even though he is the newest, as you can tell by his shades, he's clearly one of the coolest program directors we have. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the things that we had listed in terms of things to do at the beginning of 2020. Competence by design, the accreditation of both the MD program and the PG&E programs, resident allocations, and the major GIM redesign that's being done by Myra Capral and Ophir Morad and their group. The learning climate has been a huge issue, and as has standardization of the CARMS selection process for residency programs. One of the big efforts, and this is really thanks to Jeanette Gauguin, Lisa Richardson, Umbra Najib, and Katina the Black and Indigenous Residence Pathways in the Core Internal Medicine program. This is actually the first of its kind in Canada for internal medicine. But anyway, so we had these great plans, but next slide, please. What intervened was COVID. And COVID has forced us, it's disrupted our education in major, major ways. It's disrupted training programs and the trajectory of many residents, as well as the kind of things they did every day. And it forced us to look at issues of professionalism in terms of what do I risk and what am I willing to risk to perform the professional duties. So I just wanted to say to everybody, the residents, the program directors, the administrators, Jasmine Mohazab has played a huge role in coordinating this response, but so have others in the response to COVID, and I really also want to give my deep thanks. Next slide, please. So awards. 3 awards, starting with first award, the Teacher of the Year Award. This is an award that goes to senior faculty for work done who've been on faculty for over 10 years. The award recipient this year is Dr. David Tang Wei. Dave is a clinician educator, associate professor in the Division of Neurology. His immediate past program director of the residency program, and now serves as the interim departmental division director for neurology. In short, Dave is an absolute educational superstar. He teaches to national and international audiences on dementia, for which he is considered an international expert. And he developed and single-handedly teaches an incredibly well-regarded weekend dementia boot camp that he does every year. David's teaching excellence has been formally recognized by a number of different awards, and this is only the latest of many awards. And his excellence in teaching and innovation in education has been matched by his clinical skills. As people may remember from the previous annual day, he was one of the inaugural recipients of the Master Clinician Award for the Department of Medicine, and is clearly the doctor's doctor in the management of neurologic disease. Next slide, please. The Goldie prizes are two prizes which go in either educational scholarship or teaching. This year's Goldie Prize in Education Scholarship, awarded to somebody who is under 10 years in rank, goes to Dr. Esther Bowie. Esther is an amazing clinician educator and associate professor in the Division of Neurology. She has had many accomplishments, including establishing the first ever women's neurology clinical fellowship in Canada. Of note, Esther has taken the lead in developing something called MyTE, which is a unique mobile app that allows for rapid resident assessment of faculty teaching, both in clinical and classroom environments. This app has the potential to address long-standing needs in the department in terms of teaching assessment, but particularly in the area of ambulatory care and emergency medicine. And we believe that this will facilitate the success and promotion of literally dozens of faculty members, not only in the Department of Medicine, but beyond the department as well. Next slide, please. The final Goldie Prize recipient goes to Dr. David Frost of Toronto Western Hospital for teaching. David is a clinician, teacher, associate professor in the Division of General Internal Medicine at the Western. He is an absolute legendary educator there. He has accumulated numerous awards for teaching excellence since he has joined faculty in 2010. Most recently, the Whiteman-Barris Award for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching, the Excellence in Postgraduate Teaching Award from UHN, as well as the Anderson Award for Program Innovation and Education, also from UHN. Comments about his teaching include created an exceptional educational environment, a phenomenal staff member, quote, without a doubt, the best clinical teacher I have ever had, in parentheses, and everyone I spoke to said the same, unquote. So David, this is well deserved, and our heartiest congratulations. And thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Farku, I'm the Vice Chair of the Department of Medicine, and it's been a great honor to follow this portfolio over the last 5 years. I have to thank Jillian for the opportunity. I want to first acknowledge someone who's moved on, Joanna King, who was our amazing research administrator over the past 5 years. She's moved on to the Department of Family and Community Medicine, but her contributions will live on for many years to come. And there are many others that I will acknowledge as well, but trying to get through in the next 10 minutes, really some amazing developments in the Department of Medicine. We have over 1,400 members overall, but about 400 of us are clinician scientists or investigators, and have secured almost $200 million in research funding, which is amazing. Next. We also, as you know, have put a lot of emphasis at the leadership level in the merit review, which is really acknowledging those individuals who are beyond the first 5 years of their appointment as a clinician scientist in the department. And this year we had overwhelming response, 35 applicants, of which we divided them into two groups, those within 10 years of their faculty appointment and those greater than 10 years. I just want to acknowledge the amazing leadership of Kevin Kane, who really, his stewardship has really brought this forward as a major initiative in the department, and all the members of the committee that are listed here. We will announce the awardees within the next few days, but I'll just be saying that we really this year tried to award as many of merit to these meritorious individuals as possible, and I thank Jillian and Margaret for really helping to get us to a level of fairly good reimbursement here of these merit awardees. The networks we've talked about before, we have networks within the Department of Medicine, which cross institutions, which cross divisions and disciplines, and which cross pillars. And the whole advance of the networks is under the umbrella of diversity, what we call the YYZ initiatives. And next slide. You'll see that we actually have funded in a network seed funding opportunity in the last year three of our major networks, one in education research led by Lynn Straub, OncoGemini led by Monica Krasnowski, and the Toronto Antimicrobial Resistance Research Network, which is led by Nick Daneman. Congratulations to these individuals and their teams for some very transformative projects. And again, we have over 10 networks now that have been developed. We have moved forward now over 100 graduates of the Eliot Phillipson Clinician Scientist Training Program. These are our new Phillipson Scholars. You'll see them listed here, and then our new trainees. I just want to point out that this year we actually were able to accommodate 8 individuals into the training program and fully funded these 5 individuals as Phillipson Scholars. We also have, next slide, awarded this year a Clinician Educator Training Program trainee and Sarah Kahn in Adult Endocrinology and Metabolism. So congratulations to Sarah and to Schiffer Ginsburg and her committee for moving this important initiative forward as well. Next slide. Well, we've had to face COVID on the research front as well. We have had to shut down research activities, non-COVID activities, and now we're just revamping. In the last, about a week ago, we opened up our labs, 20% capacity. But we really want to acknowledge the University of Toronto, Faculty of Medicine, and overall faculty of the University of Toronto who awarded COVID-19 Action Initiative grants. Up to $500,000 awards were given, and we had 6 awardees in the Department of Medicine, again, always punching a little bit above our weight. And these are the awardees as listed, and these projects are going forward. We also, next slide, within the Department of Medicine, actually announced a COVID funding opportunity. Jillian was able to secure $100,000 in funding, and these 5 awardees, 5 groups were awarded grants that were initiated, reviewed within a week and a half. I want to thank Kaveh Sojania for his help on this. And now these funds have been released now, and we're hoping to advance that forward. Next slide. Finally, I want to acknowledge the Department of Medicine Research Awards Committee. This committee is diverse, represents individuals across the research portfolio, and they are responsible for the review of the Eaton and Goldie Awards, but also we have also been able to secure many international and national prizes because of the work of this important committee. Next. And you can see some of our accolades in the last year. I want to just point out New Canada Research Chairs, Ken Koidaru, Marzia Gassemi, and Schiffer Ginsburg. You can see other individuals have been awarded major international and national prizes. And this is just a sample of the talent that we have in the faculty with regards to research awards. And it's only going to get better as each of our divisions have now appointed leads to be responsible for disease-specific awards and other national and international prizes. So I want to thank the division directors for their work on this front in the last year. So now on to the awards. Well, we have 3 awards to announce. Next slide, sorry. On to awards. The Eden Scholar Researcher of the Year in the Basic Sciences goes to my colleague, Mansour Hussain. Dr. Hussain is a cardiologist at University Health Network and is executive director of the Ted Rogers Center for Heart Research, professor of medicine at the University of Toronto. He did most of his postgraduate training in Toronto and then went on to Harvard and MIT for postgraduate, postdoctoral fellowship, particularly in the program of excellence in the cardiovascular biology at MIT. Mansour has secured many salary awards, including CIHR, Clinician Scientist Award, Heart and Stroke Career Investigator Awards. And he has also really spearheaded the development of many of our young investigators and scientists. Mansour's research aims to identify therapeutic targets involved in the pathophysiology of cardiovascular disease. He's truly a bench-to-bedside investigator scientist with an approach to understanding cardiovascular mechanisms, and most recently, he's really distinguished himself in the evaluation of GLP-1 agonists and new targets for diabetes and heart disease and other related drugs in the diabetes field, which have made international impact. The quote that comes from Dr. Mansour's nomination, Dr. Mansour Hussain's nomination is, he has produced high quality work in well-respected journals, long-term peer-reviewed funding, over the course of his career with uninterrupted funding, and his leadership positions have motivated the young investigators. So congratulations, Mansour, on this important award. Next, Dr. Paula Rochon is the Eaton Scholar Research of the Year in the Clinical Sciences. And Dr. Rochon, these are lifetime and career awards. So both for Dr. Hussain and Dr. Rochon, this really celebrates a whole body of career-related activities. Dr. Rochon is a geriatrician and vice president of research at the Women's College Hospital, professor of medicine at University of Toronto, and is the inaugural chair of the Retired Teachers of Ontario Chair in Geriatric Medicine. Her research focuses on understanding the unique needs of older adults, particularly older women, and promoting their health and wellness. She has contributed to highlighting the considerations of sex and gender and age in research that is most relevant to not only older women, but also to men. She has a very strong record of federal funding and has been elected to the Canadian Academy of Health Sciences. The quote that comes from her nomination: "This equity approach to research is helping achieve our bold vision at the University of Toronto to create a healthier, more equitable world for everyone." Next slide. And finally, an important award awarded to a researcher within the first 10 years of faculty appointment, the William Goldie Prize, goes to Dr. Harinder Waisesundara from the Division of Cardiology. Harindra is an interventional cardiologist, clinician scientist at the Schulich Heart Center at Sunnybrook Health Sciences Center. He is the director of research in the Division of Cardiology, a senior scientist at the Sunnybrook Research Institute, and an adjunct senior scientist at ICES. His clinical practice is focused on transcatheter aortic valve implantation and the treatment of chronic total occlusions of the coronary arteries. And his research program focuses on health technology assessments in cardiovascular disease using unique decision analytic models, which are populated and validated by real-world administrative data. And the quote that comes from the nomination of Dr. Waisesundara is: "The most traditionally impressive CV submitted to the Goldie competition belongs to Harindra. He has had an impressive research path. He has had a impressive research pathway in a major research area and has clearly excelled. By all metrics, he is outstanding." So congratulations to Drs. Hussain, Rochon, and Waisesundara. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike, and everyone else. It's a pleasure to be here, even though it's not under the circumstances we were used to or would have preferred. Next slide, please. So I think we've all heard how the upside of the pandemic has been that it's fostered rapid and successful collaborations, brought about some improvements like greater use of virtual care and telemedicine, and highlighted, though, unfortunately, some chronic problems like the woeful states of many long-term care facilities that we must now finally address. And these other icons on this slide, I thought I included them because in the context of the many opportunities for depression and despair as a result of what's been going on over the past, several months now, I thought I would mention this very hopeful book, Humankind: A Hopeful History, that came out in English just a couple of weeks ago, actually, to widespread acclaim. Some of you may remember Roger Bregman, who's shown in that middle picture, the book that he wrote, Utopia for Realists, a few years ago, which was a surprise critical and commercial success. Among other things, it discusses the surprising amount of evidence, hard evidence, in support of a universal basic income, including a study from Dauphin, Manitoba. I'm from Winnipeg. It was actually conducted when I was 5 years old, and every adult in Dauphin received $19,000 in income, which now would be about $100,000. And amazingly, in a catch-22 of politics, the results were never analyzed. The people who had supported it didn't want to risk it showing no benefit, and the people who were against it didn't want to throw good money after bad. Then a professor at the University of Manitoba found out about this in 2004. It took her 5 years of detective work. And when she finally found the archive, the dusty boxes somewhere, and analyzed the results, it showed massive impacts on poverty, reductions in hospitalizations, increase in education, better situations for women, the list goes on. What he also covers is that around the same time in the late 1960s, there were 4 such studies in the United States that had such positive results that numerous famous economists wrote an open letter in the New York Times to Congress calling for a national basic income. And Nixon, of all people, was actually got a bill passed through House and was on the verge of getting it through the Senate until at the last minute someone noticed that the divorce rate went up by 50%. Now, everyone assumed that was true and that women were feeling less fettered to bad marriages, but actually 10 years later, it turned out that was a statistical error and that actually the divorce rate hadn't changed. But it was too late, and actually this never saw the light of day. And actually, some of you may remember Ronald Reagan famously sneered that in the 1960s we waged a war on poverty and poverty won. In any case, the new book discusses numerous instances and bodies of research that contradict the cynical view that many of us probably have, which is that beneath a superficial veneer, if you strip everything away, we're basically selfish, terrible people. And I think now is a time when we're surrounded by so many important crises and feeling that maybe now things will finally change for the better and not return to more of the same. This book couldn't have come at a better time. Next slide, please. So I can't possibly name all the interesting and important things that members of the department have done over the last 4 months related to the quality portfolio or a response to the crisis in general, but a couple that I want to call out. So one, many of you have heard of, it received quite a bit of attention in the media and obviously in the department and the hospitals, is LTC Plus. So this actually grew out of 2 initiatives related to the department put in place well before COVID. One at Trillium, led by Sean Chug, a member of our department and a graduate of the Master's Program in Quality Improvement and Patient Safety, and the other one part of Women's signature virtual strategy called Aging in Place. And this LTC Plus, the basic idea of which was that department members at Women's, Unity, Sunnybrook, and Baycrest, as well as other departments like Family and Community Medicine, came together to develop a much larger program aimed at delivering necessary care to nursing home residents without them having to come to hospital. Now, initially, the idea was conceived as a way of protecting these residents from exposure to COVID in the hospitals. Of course, as we all know, it later turned out that long-term care homes were in fact being ravaged by COVID, and so LTC Plus just shifted to providing necessary care to support the providers working in those nursing homes. Next slide, please. So this sea of organizational logos is really just meant to capture the massive and incredible collaborations that were quickly formed and remain in place. There's something, it is now, so well, I won't name all the logos, but you'll see that they include not just hospitals, but the Toronto Paramedic Service, which now regularly provides data and actually shifted some of its processes of care. Dyna Labs, Medigas, Life Labs, Gemini was a key support based at St. Michael's, was a key support for a lot of the data and evaluation. And of course, the Ontario Health System itself. And actually, LTC Plus has become a core part of Toronto's strategy to support long-term care homes in general. Next slide, please. I also just want to mention that virtual care, of course, relates even more to ambulatory care than it does to nursing home or hospital care. And there's been some terrific work done by many of the members of a network of clinicians in quality improvement, as well as other department members who've been meeting roughly weekly to bi-weekly since the crisis began to share tips and identify barriers for ramping up virtual visits. In addition to the practical tip sharing and so on that they have done, they've already generated some publications, including one of the ones shown here on how to conduct a virtual neurologic exam, another one for conducting physiatry visits, which we can all imagine would be much more difficult in the virtual context. There's also been several virtual services for following COVID patients once they've been discharged from hospital, one of them cleverly called the COVIDeo service. The picture here is the one at Sunnybrook, led by Phil Lamb, shown in the picture, but also Nisha Andani, who you can't quite see on the screen, Nick Daneman, and Adrian Chan, and also a checklist shown here for patients on what they should have when they come to their virtual visit. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. Unrelated to either COVID or virtual care, I just wanted to give a shout out of pride to the fact that the New England Journal of Medicine's website, sorry, go back one slide. The New England Journal website, NEJM Resident 360, ran a QI contest, and they had 11 finalists, and actually 4 of the 11 were from the U of T, 3 from the Department of Medicine. The 4th was from pediatrics, and so I've shown the 3 from the Department of Medicine here, which include 1 from geriatrics, 1 from critical care, and 1 from physiatry. So a huge thumbs up and round of applause for the residents involved in those projects. Next slide. Speaking of awards, then the time now to mention the awards in quality. And the first one, go ahead, next slide. To Peter Rossos. So the Department of Medicine has 2 major awards in quality. Of course, the departments at the different hospitals and the many divisions also have awards, but it really gives me great pleasure to announce that the recipient of this year's Department of Medicine Award in Quality goes to Peter Rossos from the Division of Gastroenterology and University Health Network. Peter did his training here at the U of T, as many of you know, and started on faculty as a clinician teacher in 1992. For a variety of reasons related to Peter's clinical focus on therapeutic endoscopy, he quickly recognized the importance of the intersection between clinical care and technology, yet also the importance of teamwork and collaboration. I won't dwell on the early GI examples because this award mostly recognizes Peter's impressive body of work that has benefited a far larger community than just gastroenterology, but I will note that Peter led the first group to publish an endoscopic image management system integrating endoscopy into PACS. They presented it in 1997 as a low-cost alternative to expensive proprietary solutions at the time, but I gather it is still in use at UHN today, capturing hundreds of endoscopic and surgical images every day at minimal operating expense. Peter initiated the UHN telehealth program back in 2003, so 17 years before the rest of us finally caught on, and he played a key role in one of the largest computerized physician order entry initiatives at the time, frankly, in any country, and that's an area that I actually have expertise in myself, so I well know how impressive that initiative was. That was in 2004. Peter also served as the clinical co-lead for Connecting GTA, which, as we all know, is a regional electronic health record for 7 million people, and the cornerstone of the province's digital health strategy. Peter was also an invited speaker on e-health and telemedicine at the House of Commons and was appointed by the Lieutenant Governor and Council to the Board of Directors for eHealth Ontario in 2006. I'll also add that Peter has mentored many trainees and junior colleagues who have gone on to do excellent work in informatics. In fact, I first learned of Peter mostly indirectly through meeting some of these people. Some of these people have gone on to have really important positions, including at least one chief medical information officer at a large Toronto hospital, who I recently learned, because he's also a gastroenterologist, actually embarked on this path due to encountering Peter as a medical student and then as a resident. So while this award primarily recognizes the impressive and valuable body of Peter's own work, it also reflects the tremendous impact he has had on trainees and junior colleagues over the years who've had the privilege with working him, and I think the impact still continue today. So please join me in congratulating Peter. Next slide, please. The clinician the CQI job description now includes so many excellent and effective faculty members that we struggled to choose a single winner for the Goldie Award. So we actually wanted to name 2 recipients, and there were at least several others that we could have named. But the first of this year's winners is Geeta Mukherjee. Geeta is an assistant professor in the CQI track, part of our cohort of the first appointments in this job description. She's also an endocrinologist at Women's College Hospital, where she's practiced since coming on faculty in 2013, and a core member of the Women's Institute in Health Systems and Virtual Care, which we all know as WEAVE. This award recognizes Geeta's work in 3 distinct areas, including resource stewardship, diabetes quality improvement, and innovations in ambulatory care, including several recent projects in virtual care. Some of her work on high-value laboratory stewardship initiatives has been scaled up across institutions and informed national toolkits for Choosing Wisely Canada and also the Royal College. Her work on virtual care includes an ED diversion program for sickle cell crises in general medicine, a multidisciplinary young adult type 1 transition program for diabetes, a multifaceted primary care practice-based intervention to reduce ED visits for complex medical patients as part of the SCOPE program, which actually Jillian basically led the development of. And more recently, she's been actively involved in evaluating COVID care at home, as well as the LTC Plus initiative. She's played a really important role in the evaluation of that. And as an endocrinologist, it will come as no surprise that she's done a lot of projects in improving diabetes care. On a personal note, I'll just say that I have watched Geeta contribute to the various QI training programs in the department and at CQUIPS and IHPME. So please join me in congratulating her and recognizing her work and the impact she's having on patient care, as well as trainees who are interested in QI. Next, the other winner of this year's Goldie Award for Quality is Samir Sinha, who many of you know is the Director of Geriatrics at Sinai Health System and UHN. He also, despite being at still a relatively early career stage, holds an endowed chair in geriatrics at Mount Sinai. This award recognizes Samir's many efforts locally, provincially, nationally, and frankly, recently internationally to develop new models of medical and social care to support healthy aging. One of the whole points of having a job description for quality innovation and highlighting the value of CPA is that, as we all know, there are many important forms of impact beyond publications and grants. And Samir's work sits at the intersection of traditional research, quality improvement, and health policy. And this work, along with his advocacy for senior, has had many impacts beyond traditional metrics such as publication and grants, though he has had many of those traditional metrics as well. It's difficult to call out specific elements of his broad body of work, but one example is his work at Sinai and UHN on what's called ACE, or acute care for elderly. I actually first learned about this when I was still a fellow myself in the States, and this work has been supported by Canadian Foundation for Health Innovation grant to help 18 other healthcare organizations complete 57 model evaluations of this sort of model from 2016 to 17. And since then, he's been working not just with groups in Canada, but actually recently Taiwan's Ministry of Health to disseminate best practice models of care like this in their hospital. Samir is also the co-chair of the City of Toronto's senior strategies and an expert advisor to the Ministry of Health on various issues related to seniors affairs. He is also, interestingly, the Director of Health Policy Research at the National Institute on Aging at Ryerson, and these roles have provided vehicles not just for Samir's advocacy on the behalf of the elderly, but also for his passion for health policy, where ultimately we have the best opportunity to make improvements. In announcing this award, I can't help mention on a personal note that I did not know Samir until he arrived in Toronto, though we're both from Winnipeg and in fact went to the same high school, which I didn't realize until I was back visiting and scanned the huge plaque listing the actually surprising number of Rhodes Scholars who come from that high school. Samir is one of them. And then I made the connection with his last name to realize that I delivered my first baby with his mother, who's an obstetrician in Winnipeg. So it thus gives me particular pleasure to announce this award to Samir as important and ongoing work for everyone at the other end of the spectrum from babies, namely the elderly. So thank you very much, and thank you for your attention. Congratulations to everybody who's done this important work in the quality and innovation portfolio.
Hi, everyone, and welcome, and thanks to all the great presentations so far. So mine will differ a little bit. My name's Lisa Richardson, for those who don't know me, and I was recently appointed as the Vice Chair of Culture and Inclusion and just started my portfolio actually on March the 1st. And so rather than looking back over the year, which is what my colleagues have done, I'm going to be reflecting a little bit on the time that's passed in these past few months and looking forward into the vision for where we may go. Before doing that, I wanted to acknowledge the incredible work that our department has already done in the area of culture and inclusion under the leadership of Dr. Sharon Strauss, and then subsequently Andrea Page and Carolyn Chessex and the Mentorship Equity Diversity Committee. We really already as a department within the Faculty of Medicine and actually across the country are known for being very progressive in many of the the structures that we've implemented. So changes around standardizing search committees, implicit bias training, allyship training, structured mentorship programs, the scorecards that have emerged around income, and the incredible work being done for inclusion and equity more broadly with our Indigenous and Black student application program for CARMS, as well as the LGBTQ ambassadors. And I wanted to give a shout out to the work of Kevin Imrie and Carolyn Chessex and Tamina Ahmed, especially in light of this being Pride Month. So just there's much work that's already been done, and I wanted to acknowledge that. The new portfolio now includes not just equity and mentorship, but also this critical area of wellness. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. I think that all three of these areas have seemed incredibly resonant during this time. And for those who've seen me present recently, they know that I love this framework, which was put forward by one of the great leaders in physician wellness, who's currently the chief wellness officer at Stanford University, called, and it's a paper published in JAMA just in April this year, Coping with COVID. And after interviewing people at Stanford around their wishes and hopes during the COVID time, this group came up with the framework, Hear Me, Protect Me, Prepare Me, Support Me, Care for Me, and lastly, Honor Me. And so these were the concerns that emerged from those on the front lines, both and all the academics actually in their faculty of medicine. And I thought it was a really nice framework for us to think about where we want to go as a department. Really, when I started my portfolio, the idea was to spend the first 5 to 6 months gathering information and figuring out what your needs were as a department. So really listening and paying attention. And I think that when I hear the work that's been done already, even in the past year, we are listening and people are responding. And so we encourage you to continue to do that. The idea of protecting me, I never thought that the wellness portfolio would be about advocating for PPE, but we've been through quite an intense time, and I think we're all now in a space where we feel that we are protected with enough PPE. The Prepare Me was the idea of actually feeling like we had the knowledge, the expertise, the training that we needed. Supporting Me is the idea of feeling that we have structural supports related to childcare and other things that one needs structurally in order to be successful. And Care for Me is if we should become unwell, that we would be looked after in the COVID time. Lastly, they added in this idea of honoring me, which is thanking and recognizing all of the hard work that's been done. So you can see how this is a striking framework that resonated with me, and whenever I speak and share it, it resonates with many people during COVID. But I think of it as a really wonderful way to structure and think about everything that we do in our department in the portfolio of culture and inclusion going forward around our well-being, hearing, protecting, preparing you, supporting you, caring for you, and recognizing and honoring all of the great work that you're doing, such as what we're doing here today. Next slide, please. COVID, though, has revealed other epidemics, which we've already spoken to. And these are epidemics which were known to exist. But of course, COVID has exposed and made them much more obvious. One is the epidemic of physician burnout, where 39 to 50% in the CMA survey, about 39% of physicians met criteria. In the US, it's up to 50% of physicians meeting criteria for burnout. The epidemic of health inequities, which my colleagues have already spoken to in the context of what's happening in long-term care, but also if we look at the postal code data, for example, in Toronto. And most recently, the epidemic of racism, which of course is not new, but which is suddenly in all of our faces all the time, and very importantly so, I would add. Next slide, please. So burnout, I wanted to share this briefly because I wanted to recognize that this is something that many of us may be experiencing, but how can we actually shift our perspective from thinking about this syndrome of exhaustion, cynicism, and problems with professionalism to actually thinking about what is making us well? And so I want to encourage us, as we're thinking about and moving forward with this portfolio and culture change, what are our strengths? What are the things that we do well, and how can we leverage those and build on those to make us a stronger and better department, so that we're not speaking about burnout next year. We're actually speaking about all of the things that protect us and make us stronger and well. Next slide, please. In terms of the epidemic of health inequities and racism, I've spoken briefly about what's happened in long-term care, and I really want us to think not just about the experience of the residents there, but the experience of the caregivers there and the PSWs specifically, because we know that we know about many of the structural problems that led to their high rates of COVID amongst those workers as well. And the data around COVID affecting certain neighborhoods in much higher ways, as well as racialized communities, and we're getting that data both in the Toronto, but also seeing it glaringly obvious in the US. The inequity of the racism that I've spoken about, and of course anti-Black racism is on everyone's minds, as is anti-Indigenous racism and police violence. But I wanted to also acknowledge other forms of discrimination that we've seen during COVID, I think, that have been highlighted and that have been pre-existing as well, around anti-Asian racism, for example, and because it's Pride Month, to think about the discrimination harassment experienced by those in the LGBTQ2S community. So these are all areas that we need to tackle in our portfolio of culture and inclusion. Next, please. So in the midst of this sadness, of these stories, of the overwhelming media, the loss, the fatigue that many of us may be feeling from homeschooling or childcare or looking after our loved ones who we've taken out of LTC. I mean, there are many, many, many layers of sadness from dealing with outbreaks. Where do we go from here? How do we actually leverage these difficult times? Which for some, and you know, I want to quote Kaveh, who used the word depression and despair, and Jillian, who used the word unprecedented times. How do we move from this sadness that many of us may be feeling to moments of hope and inspiration? Next slide, please. I actually think, and I think we've seen this demonstrated already in the work that's being presented by all three of the other vice chairs. Actually, COVID is an opportunity for us to strengthen the work that we're doing by making us much more mindful of caring for one another, by making us attentive to inequities in society. We're also finding opportunities for innovation. We're finding opportunities for incredible science and opportunities for new ways of teaching and learning, which I think are really inspiring. And I want us to shift from that has been how, quite frankly, as you know, an Indigenous scholar, I've managed to cope in these last few weeks in particular with all of the violence that we're seeing, is how do we take this sadness and switch it around so that we know that every member of our department is heard, protected, prepared, supported, and cared for by one another, so that we are looking out for one another, but also by our leaders and our institutions. Next slide, please. So how do we do this? We do this through individual and structural interventions in the areas of wellness, equity, and mentorship. Many, as I've mentioned, are already in place, but in the future, each of these areas will have a lead position. Each will have an advisory group and a committee or a committee. We already have created the COVID Wellness Committee, and there've been amazing work happening with representatives from across the different sites who are coming together, sharing ideas that likely you've all been hearing about, but also from the different educational portfolios, and some of the divisions have also appointed wellness leads. We've also outlined very specific approaches that Jillian shared in detail in her most recent column around how we want to deal with the current climate of anti-Black racism, including through recruiting, retaining, and supporting Black learners, also Indigenous learners, faculty, and other leaders, and broad initiatives that we've already started related to allyship that will be expanded more broadly. Also, you'll be seeing more and more educational opportunities related to anti-racist practice. Next slide, please. I want us to recognize that when we create a culture where we have a diverse membership of our department. And a culture where everyone feels included, meaning they feel a sense of belonging and can be themselves, where we're valuing the well-being of every member of our department. Through that, when people are feeling supported, heard, protected, listened to, they will actually be able to reach their full potential. And we will continue to see the excellence that we've seen in our department grow and reach even greater levels. So I want us to really shift from this idea that diversity and inclusion is a must-do to understanding that having diverse environments where we are all well and supporting one another will allow us to be excellent. Next slide, please. Ending on the language of excellence, I'm going to move on to the awards, and I actually am fortunate to be able to present many awards, so I will not be spending as long on the descriptions as my colleagues were, just because we have quite a few to get through. So the first award is the Robert Hyland Award for Excellence in Mentorship, and this award, it's a pleasure to announce, is going to Dr. Kailash Radar, and I'll read one of the quotes from her nomination letter. Dr. Sridhar exemplifies the essence of an excellent mentor. She is always available and approachable to discuss clinical cases and research ideas. Her insight and expertise in her field is a tremendous asset, and she is always willing to share her expertise locally and beyond. So congratulations to Dr. Sridhar for being the recipient for this award, and Dr. Sridhar is in the Division of Medical Oncology. We have two awardees for the newly named Michael Gordon Award for Humanism in Medicine, Dr. Sivakumar Gulasingham, and I'll read a brief note from his incredible work from the Division of Physical Medicine Rehab. During his 20-year medical career, his passion has helped the underprivileged, and it's led him to work with civil war and Asian tsunami victims, as well as disabled war veterans in Sri Lanka. He's continuing this passion through his work with people with physical disabilities in Canada, and really Dr. Gulasingham's work around supporting those with physical disabilities, spinal cord injuries is phenomenal. So congratulations to Dr. Gulasingham. The second awardee for the Humanism Award, the Michael Gordon Award for Humanism, is Dr. Leslie Lee. And Dr. Lee has actually received 2 awards, so I've had to choose 2 different elements of his bio. So for this one, I wanted to say that he's got phenomenal interest. He's got a huge range of interests. Is known, of course, as a phenomenal teacher and educator, but his clinical interests are in the clinical phenomenology and neurology, advancing treatments in multiple sclerosis. But he's also developed neurology care in the developing world, especially in Africa. And I think one of the exciting things about these celebrations is we learn about our colleagues' work that we haven't necessarily heard before. So we'll go on. The congratulations to the awardees, and we're going to move on to the next set of well, they're not award winners, but they are, of course, have been selected through a rigorous process to become members of the Academy of Master Clinicians. So the first new member of the Academy of Master Clinicians, next slide please, is Dr. Michelle Vladunovich. I guess, do I have a specific slide for Michelle? So I'll just say that Dr. Vladunovich is well known by many for, of course, being the new physician-in-chief at Sunnybrook Hospital, but she has so many accomplishments, it's hard to summarize it. I'll just give one line. She's an accomplished educator and has taught extensively locally, nationally, and internationally. However, her most important priority will always be patient care. And I love that line, so thank you. Dr. Lee, once again, Dr. Lee's mentors were John Werrett and Trevor Gray, who apparently were role models for dedicated and astute patient care. But I thought that he is just the ultimate person to embody dedicated and astute patient care and the art of practicing neurology in a thoughtful and compassionate manner. Dr. Ophir Murad legendary. All of these figures are legendary, of course. He has a clinical interest in diagnostic challenges and is passionate about teaching and mentorship. And the list of awards that he's won for teaching are pages long, literally. So I will not list them all. And lastly, but not least, of course, is Dr. Maria Zorzito, who's some would say demonstrates, as her bio says, demonstrates a passion for clinical medicine, especially in the care of the frail elderly with complex multimorbidities, where often there's diagnostic uncertainty, and she accepts the challenge of dealing with the uncertainty. She also does so in a heartfelt approach to patient care in a holistic way, not only for the patients, but for the caregivers. So thank you to all of these incredible new members of the Academy of Master Clinicians.
So back to me. Thank you, all of you. Actually, go back to the thank you for a second, please. I'm sitting here listening to these 4 spectacular vice chairs thinking, what an incredibly lucky chair I am. Somebody once said that they thought the executive was all a bunch of yes people and, you know, that there's no debate. I think you can see that there's a lot of debate and a lot of discussion, and these are very articulate, brilliant, creative and innovative individuals who have really helped very much to steer the direction of this incredible department. I have a few additional thank yous before we wrap it up. I'm amazed that we got to where we got right now. I do want to say congratulations to all of the people who've just received awards. I wish we probably should have done a soundtrack of clapping, you know, big applause, whooping, whatever. So, you know, maybe if you're sitting someplace, give everybody a round of applause for incredible work, and I'm going to do it right now. So congratulations. Next slide, please. I can't believe that this is the end of my 6th year, which means I only have 4 to go. We're at the beginning of the end. And I love this job. Like I've told you many times, I'm a kid in a candy shop. This is the most incredible department. This year, very fortunately, I was given 2 6-week blocks of research time to actually analyze data, which I also love to do, and write papers. And for that, I want to thank Mike Farku, who stepped in through the whole move, through the beginning of this transition from Claire to Margaret, etc., as the acting chair of the department. Mike did a spectacular job, and I hung out in the middle of nowhere and very much rebooted or recharged my batteries. And thank you, Michael. Next slide, please. We have over 400 members of our faculty and many trainees who support the work that you've just heard about, and far too many to put on a single slide. But I really want to acknowledge all the people that run our hospitals, our physicians in chief, our incredible 20 departmental division directors who I know care so much about all of you, our patients who've put up with us and who are grateful, and who often become donors to the department and to the hospitals, for which we are very grateful. Despite COVID, we've continued to see donations come in, and we're starting to see our alumni really step up to pay it forward as well. And for that, I think we're all extremely grateful. Next slide. But really, you know, for all of us, the people behind the scene, and, you know, usually I have a nice picture of the staff, but I couldn't get a nice picture of the staff. So we've got our Zoom staff meeting from, I think it was last week. And here are some amazing and gorgeous faces of the people behind the scenes that work to support our educational programs, our research, our QI, the Culture and Inclusion portfolio, formerly MED, the strategy office, recruitment, appointments, promotions. It's a lot of amazing work that these people do, and they are devoted. Many of these people have come in the past 3 months during COVID and have never actually met the other members of the staff. They've been working from their homes, and I think we're all itching to get back to Naylor and get back together. And Margaret has done a really incredible job of steering this ship through this difficult time. I particularly want to call out to Christian Bass on the left and Brianne Tulloch on the right, who've been instrumental to putting together this annual day, pictures and coordination, etc. Brianne's about to go on mat leave and had what she sort of called a hidden pregnancy, because none of us have seen her. Well, she's been growing her baby, and we wish her a great time. Monica Flack and Christian Goldberg have been manning personing the strategy office and have been doing a great job helping us with moving our strat plan forward. And now 3 of our vice chairs are in the midst of a 5-year review, and you'll be hearing from us, because we'd like to hear your input on these portfolios. Next slide, please. I think that to just close, and this is my last slide, and maybe we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. Not sure if that's going to work or not, but as I said, this has been an unprecedented year. But every time I think our department's going to be down in terms of mood or atmosphere or whatever, you seem to manage to be up, you know. And when we went into our strategic planning in September, everybody said to me, don't be too ambitious. It's, you know, there's fiscal restraint. It's so hard. There's so many patients, but I can't keep you guys down. You want to be up. You are absolutely inspirational to those around you and to me. You're not okay with being good. You want to be excellent in every realm. And for that, I am just a lucky chair. You are providing the highest, very highest of patient care. And that's why we established the Academy of Master Clinicians, which was actually members of our department's idea, like Ophir Murad and Herbert Hoping Kong, who's very much supported the creation of this academy, because none of us could be academics without the incredible clinical care that the frontline clinicians provide to our patients, and who are there for us with those really complicated patients. You're amazing teachers. You are dedicated teachers. You are incredible mentors and sponsors of the people around you. And I think just looking at the number of nominations we receive every year for awards is a testament to that. And oh my God, are you inquisitive and determined scholars? The scholarship that comes out of our department is bar none. At Vivek Goel's most recent presentation to all chairs at the Faculty of Medicine, he told us that in fact the University of Toronto is now ranking at or above Harvard in terms of scholarly productivity. That is publications, citations, quality of the journals, etc. That's been for at least 2 years now. I think we should be very, very proud of where we are and where we're going. And, you know, I'd like to think that success of the Faculty of Medicine is, for a large part, the success of this Department of Medicine. So for that, I really thank you. And I think all of the presenters today and all the awardees are to be congratulated. So we have 5 whole minutes, and I don't know if there are any questions or comments that people would like to ask, but we are here if you would like to. I'm just going to check the Q&A, but I can't see anything. I had mentioned the question posed by the residents with respect to police funding, and yeah, no new questions. We would really like to hear from you. Maybe probably this is not the right venue, but I would very much encourage you to reach out and let us know what you think. Just looking. I don't think there's anything. All right, folks. This was an unconventional annual day, but we did it. We did it on time. I don't think people are going to go on major holidays this summer, which is very sad, but I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful, hopefully, break over the summer months while it's warm and sunny and beautiful outside. Keep safe, keep healthy, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Bye.